to the painting is actually the fact you actually pull out the painting right off the bat, and they don't always have you do that. So you show this painting. This is one of my favorite Renoir paintings. You'll show this to them, and they will notice, hopefully they'll see that there are people dancing behind. So this actually really segues real well from the dancing into the painting part. So you'll show this, and basically the whole point when they're going through, well, you guys can see it, I'll just put it right here. So when you look at this painting, how do you think the people in this painting feel? Do they look like they're just depressed or
relaxed and enjoying themselves?
Yeah, they may be hot and tired. That's true. They're relaxed, and you don't see a ton of frowns on their faces, but for the most part, it looks like they're having a good time. All of those things are true. So this painting is called, it's Moulin. I do not. It's Moulin de la Galette or ball. So it's dance at the Moulin de la Galette, and so I can't speak French, obviously. But Moulin means, so they have you explain. Moulin, like Moulin Rouge, it's actually mill. It means windmill. I did not know that. And I have taught this lesson before, so that's embarrassing. So it's windmill, and like galette is like a flat pastry, or so back then a lot of it would just be bread or pastry, just like a pancake, and they sold them at this place. So this is interesting to me. It may not be interesting to you guys, but today, so this is what this is what that place looked like back then. Moulin de la Galette. It has a big windmill in the middle, and then it had trees around it, and so it's outside, and then they had rigged along, they had big chandeliers, so you can see in here, you can see these like things hanging, and then there was what's coming up, and it does look, when you first look at it, it does look like the people are dressed pretty fancy compared to what we wear today, right? So if you looked at this, you can ask the kid, do you think these people were rich? Do you think, what do you think? And then, and this is, I actually included a picture of what it looks like today. It's actually a restaurant in that spot, but they kept the windmill, the original windmill, and it is like perched on the top of that building, like it looks super dangerous, but it's like falling apart. So the interesting thing about this painting is Renoir. So when you start talking, you actually just go straight into the painting. Renoir, Pierre-Auguste Renoir. He was a painter. We talked last time about Mary Cassatt. He lived at the same time Mary Cassatt lived. And we introduced Impressionism last time. We're going to go back and kind of remind the kids what Impressionism is. So I guess probably the best way to kind of compare and contrast, you could say, okay, do you guys remember last year we talked about Mary Cassatt? Do you remember what style? And if they don't remember, yeah, actually their painting style is really similar. I have some that I couldn't remember if they were Cassatt or if they were Renoir, real similar. So this, I like tying it back into last year, especially because if you want to, and this is where Harnett comes in, you can say, if they don't remember the ism, that it's Impressionism, you can say, okay, so this picture we're going to be talking about next time, but look at this. Does this look like a photograph to you, or does it look like a painting? And they'll probably say, someone's a painting, but looks like a photograph. So what is this when something looks really real like that? What do we call it? And eventually they'll get to realism. You might have to tell them. And so do you guys remember, does this look real? And they'll go, no. They usually say it's kind of blurry, And so do you remember what ism this one is? And hopefully they'll get to Impressionism. Now we have this, both of the schools have this Impressionism thing, and you can tell which one was painted more recently. The one from Parkmont is actually better. I did a better job on it, I think. But so this one I was really heavy on the orange, I guess. So this is just basically for them to understand that it started in France, in the Eiffel Tower, but the important things are that the light, so it's sunlight, that light was huge, and that it was mostly outdoors. So this group of painters that Renoir at the time, Renoir lived, he was super, super poor. He grew up in a really poor family. His dad was a tailor. He was born in Limoges, France, but then when he was 4, the 7 kids in his family and his family all moved to Paris. And they lived near the Louvre, but they were just really, really super poor. And so he didn't start drawing until, well, he started drawing on it with his dad's tailor chalk. his dad was a tailor. He would take the tailor chalk and just draw on the ground, and the family was like, "Whoa, he is amazing!" Like he's like 3 and 4 years old. Well, I was just a prodigy, but they didn't have money, and his dad's like, "We don't have money, so we need you to get a job. You need to have a trade." So he was a porcelain painter, and that's how he became an apprentice, and he started painting porcelain. But then in the evening, because they lived right by the Louvre, he'd go in the Louvre and he'd just copy the artist. So he'd take, I guess you could do that back then, take a canvas in and just paint based on like all these paintings in the Louvre. So that's how he started. He didn't have a teacher. He just was painting flowers on porcelain and then would go to the Louvre in the afternoons and do that. So he didn't have a traditional upbringing, but as he got older, he saved up money. Like he was super frugal. They were always so poor. He saved a lot of money, and it took him 10 years of painting before he was really making a profit. He was always getting loans from his friends, but his friends were Monet, Manet, Cassatt, because Degas was. They were all living in the Montmartre area of France, and they were all like poor. None of them were famous yet. It was all realism. This was the stuff that was big then. And we talked a little bit about that last year, but this was what was great. And so if you come up with something like this, like somebody mean said, I don't know if it was about Cézanne or about Monet, but they had done a big impressionist, or they'd done a big exhibit of this non-realism type art. It wasn't called Impressionism, but some mean critic called it Impressionism because it just kind of looks like an impression of something, and they loved it. They're like, yes, that's true. And so they kept the name. The interesting thing about this is that I think that Renoir, when he was fairly young, so they were all like living there and poor, and he had a couple of friends take his like battered canvas out to the Moulin de la Galette. So he took this giant canvas out there and had it set up, and he just started painting. And it's all blurred, so you can't tell from this, and I don't know how to get a better copy because it's almost impossible to get a copy of the original. The original was huge, and this is a terrible copy because it's from my printer and it doesn't have the right colors in it. But if you can, you can look at it. The difference between the two paintings, one has very little detail, and one way to really look at it is the chandeliers. They have like almost no form. The faces are not as formed. When he was doing it, so that the original one on the massive canvas, he was doing fast outside. Then he went into his studio and took an 18 by 24 canvas and did the second one. So the one you see is this one. People like this one better, even though it's still Impressionism. They like this one better because they feel like it's more refined. It looks like he has more skill. But really, that first pass is where the real, the perspective that he had, the way he had all those faces in there. I mean, I would never try to paint like something like that in an open air. Like, I wouldn't even know where to start. Like, anyway. So he did that just one afternoon. His friends had to help him lug this giant canvas out there. He painted, and then so you can say this is actually back then the Moulin de la Galette was like bright green. The concrete was like this crazy bright green. It's worn down. It had worn down over the years, and then they really fixed it up when Montmartre area became more upscale. They fixed it up, but this was not then. It was kind of not. It was for working class people. On Sundays, they'd go there in the afternoon. It was open from 3 to midnight. They'd get the band would get a break for an hour in the evening, but other than that, it was just families, working class families that were there. So these are not rich people. For the most part, these are just working class people that would go, they could afford to go there and have galettes there, or whatever they were eating, and drinking. But this is the thing that they do like you to point out, and you can do this with the kids if you want. I will have some leaves, and it depends on your classroom if this works. So what they want to see, you'll say, okay, so why are there spots? And there's some really obvious places where there are spots, like his jacket is probably the most obvious one. But you can see their faces, like if you look around, they look really dappled, and it's all the sunlight coming through. So a lot of times the kids get confused by that. And so you can have one of the kids come up and turn the lights off if they're not too scared, but some classrooms don't get dark enough. Some of them do. Some of the portables get really dark, but I think the ones like in Niles in the Main where you can't do anything to windows, I don't know if those will get dark enough. I know at Parkmont I've had a hard time in Miss Dorsey's room and getting it dark enough. Some of them, the teachers like it dark in there, so they've done stuff to the windows, and it's great. It still works pretty well. I'll show you, but it is nice for them to see that I have two Fame flashlights. See, even this is gonna be dark enough. So you'll be able to see. I think a little bit. Yeah, you can kind of see. So if you even on the wall, you'll see that there's like. You'll see that light gets through, so you put a kid's face right next to it. And you'll see that there are little spots of light on the kid's face. And so they'll kind of understand. It's just for them to get the idea that when you're trying to paint, it's a lot more than just painting the person. Getting the lighting right was huge for the Impressionists. And being able to paint all that, the light through the leaves. So that's pretty important for this one. Also, another big thing for Renoir is the skin. People always comment about the skin in his pictures. They always look like they're glowing. There's this like warm glow to their skin that's really actually almost all the Impressionists did it, but Renoir's really pronounced that their skin is always glowing and beautiful. And so that's one of his trademarks. The interesting thing is when I started pulling out all the stuff that I have for prints of his, so these are some Monets, so you can show them the Cassat from last time to kind of just show the Impressionism. You won't have all the time. These are ones that I have from Niles. The ones that I have from Parkman. Oh, and this one you don't even have to show them. At Parkman, I actually got this one as well. This is our secondary print. So you don't even have to show them the My Gems. You could show them this one about the just realism, because then they would not have seen the one you're going to have next. But I like this one a lot because it does kind of looks more 3D to me than the one that they chose. So that's the Harnett print. So you can show them the different. Because like he has warm skin too, but there's something about Renoir. It's like there's this just glowing underneath the skin. It's the way he does the pink with the blue undertone. I don't know. I love it. But then I do have So this I could have used that so you could see. So that's the dance at the Moulin de la Galette. But this is the place. But a lot of people just call it the place. A lot of people call that painting by that name.
But the real name is
the ball. Yeah. And there is a stat. Okay there. So there are, if you're going to do the painting part, then I have, these are actually all Niles. Niles for some reason has tons of supplementary prints that go with this. So this is a Renoir print, and you can see one thing that's interesting about him is that he went through phases. So he started out really impressionistic, and he got famous with the rest of the Impressionists. And then as he traveled more places in Europe where like more classical, realistic stuff was, and he had not traveled, like he was really poor, when he was younger. So he started kind of reverting and doing things that were more realistic, and I think that's when there are a bunch of them that are more realistic looking, unless this has a lot more dappled look to it. There are a bunch of them that are really, like this is one here. It's a lot more, it just looks, yeah, but like with some of the strokes almost look like Starry Night. Like you can really see the paint in it. Not in the same way, but it's not as realistic.
Post-impressionism.
Right. Yes. These are two. This one, I think both of these are Degas. But the type of impressionism that so then I have these. So the contrast is really good. So this is one of his earlier works. This is one of his later works. So you can see how he was really way more impressionistic here. And then he got a lot more serious. But toward the end of his life, he was 78 when he died. So yeah, these are all much more impressionistic. There's a lot. So I'm going to divide these up. I found a calendar. That's where I got all these pictures. And so I'm going to put half of them at Niles and half at Parkmont. And I'll mat them for you guys. So you'll be able to show the two different styles. But he did go back to a more impressionistic style at the end of his life. He decided that he preferred that, and he felt like he could get more feeling into the painting. So when you talk about him, I totally forgot. So when you start talking about him, what I like to do is talk about the 4 art elements. The kids are much quicker at the 4 art elements than they are at the music elements. But just as long as they're kind of trying to remember the 4, so they'll always know color, and they usually remember texture. Light and shadow sometimes takes them a little while, but line, they never get it because I think it's the way it's written on the poster, because it's too hard to read. And line is such a hard thing for kids to conceptualize as well. So they're like, there aren't lines on that painting, like they don't understand. So we talked a little bit about that, but this time it's all about texture. And so it leads us into our art project. So, and there are a couple other things if you want to do more with him. He actually got arthritis really bad at the end of his life, but he was still painting. So in his wheelchair with his arthritis, they would take his hand and he'd put this in and then he'd wrap it around. You can do this with one of the kids. And it would be completely, his whole hand would be covered and he'd be holding it and he'd be painting like this because his hands, because the arthritis was so bad. He was painting all the way up until the end. So
this
it was amazing.
Stop the shaking or
No, it's not the shaking, but arthritis is hard to hold. So yeah, so it didn't stop any shaking. But arthritis isn't shaking, it's just the not being able to grip, right?
Yeah, the pain.
So the shaking from being old, that was a totally different thing. So, so then that's, I just want to make sure I have covered everything. Okay, so so to explain about the art project, we'll have to come in here because there's so much mess. Sorry, we're going here. If you guys, oh my gosh, I'm way over time.